Right, so I thought I'd make this video just going over uh, like learning to paramotor in New Zealand. So unlike America, in New Zealand you have to have a license. Um, I don't know, there's probably a few reasons for this. New Zealand's geographically quite a small country with a reasonable busy airspace if you live near one of the main centres, which New Zealand's population kind of does. Um, yeah, I mean, it is what it is. So the way that I went about it, there's when you get your paramotor license in New Zealand, um, you need to first essentially get your paragliding license. So you can just like learn to paramotor straight up, but you'll get your paragliding license first. So you'll do, I think it's 20 flights when you do the full course, and then so you'll do 20 free flights where you'll fly a paraglider. And then you'll transition onto the motor after that. There's a couple of exams you need to pass as well. So that's the one way to do it. The way I did it is I learned to paraglide first. I learned to paraglide in 2020, which is the paragliding license is 40 flights, 4 different sites. I think there's 2 exams. And yeah, so I learned to paraglide 2020 and I learned to paramotor at the start of last year. So I've been paragliding for I think like 4 years, and I didn't have that many hours paragliding because where I live in Wellington, it's not paraglidable that often because the weather's usually far too windy. So yeah, coming in with about maybe 80 hours, I guess, before I got my motor rating. So I brought the motor, and then I had a paramotor hybrid wing, which is just like a paraglider wing with trimmers on it. Did my paramotor rating. And now I've got about 130, maybe like 140 hours. So I've got about 40 hours, 40 or 45 hours on the motor so far in the last year. Yeah, so in terms of New Zealand, like in terms of like where you can fly, so a paramotor and a paraglider, I guess, can fly in uncontrolled airspace. So at the moment, you've probably seen that I took off. I normally in Wellington, I take off in the industrial zone just because I don't like to make too much noise above the houses. And then my first thing to do is I climb up to 1,000 feet. So where I took off is a transit lane, and it caps out at 1,500 feet. About a kilometre to the south is the control zone. I think it's Class C airspace. So you need obviously clearance to enter that. So yeah, you can see that the foreshore there. That's where the controlled airspace starts. So I'm very careful just to like climb up the transit lane, which finishes sort of just where my knees are, or maybe slightly further out. And then here where I'm flying, it's uncontrolled up to 2,500 feet. Everywhere in the valley and on the right hand side, as you can sort of see, or just above the hills. So yeah, you can fly in anywhere in uncontrolled on a paramotor and a paraglider. For flying above built up areas, you can see that's lower hut to the left there. Paragliders and paramotors follow general aviation, like visual flight rules, I should say. So you are not allowed to fly below 1,000 feet above built up areas unless you intend to land. If you're on a paraglider, you're kind of always intending on landing because you're always like going down, I guess. In a paramotor, not really the case. And it's also a little bit rude. Paramotors are actually quite noisy. The propeller, like the engines themselves, yeah, the engine's kind of noisy, but your propeller, the one on the back of this one is 135 centimeters, and it puts out, yeah, it's loud. Like you can hear it from 1,000 feet up quite comfortably. So normally what I do is I climb up to 2,000 feet. It also gives me lots of options in terms of like if I have an engine out. Not that it's very likely. So yeah, paramotors, your engine is pretty reliable. Like let's be honest, you're pretty unlikely to get engine out unless you've like made a mistake with your maintenance. Yeah, so that sort of covers like where you can fly. So anywhere in uncontrolled airspace, you do exams to learn like how to read all the airspace maps and stuff, the VNC charts. That is what it is. In terms of how to get your license in New Zealand, there's not many schools in New Zealand, just obviously because it's such a niche sport, to get your paragliding license and then get your motor rating afterwards. So there's Auckland, Christchurch, and Queenstown are the big schools, are the big paragliding schools. And then there's a few people around the country that'll just do the motor rating, and that motor rating is it's usually like 1 or 2 days. It's not too long to get that done if you're like experienced paraglider, because it's not that much to transition from a paraglider to a paramotor, to be fair. So if you live in Wellington, like in terms of like deciding where you should learn, the best place you should learn Like all the schools are pretty good. The best place you should learn is where you can get free accommodation and where you can go somewhere. Like, I don't know, let's say you got friends and family in Auckland and you live in Wellington. If the weather's shit and you can't fly, well, you can just hang out with them instead. Because yeah, if you end up taking off like 2 weeks of work and then with the intention of going up to Auckland or going to some city to thinking that you're going to fly and the weather's wet or rainy for those 2 weeks, you miss out, and that's all that time and money that you would have spent on accommodation basically wasted unless you spent it elsewhere. So that's the biggest thing to consider. All the schools in New Zealand are pretty good. There's no all the instructors have to like be registered to the organisation, so it's not like a free-for-all and well, like America, I guess, where there is no licensing and anyone can teach it. So in New Zealand, it's kind of licensed. Yeah, that has its positives and negatives. You probably wouldn't want to just give it a go in a lot of the places in New Zealand, just because they're like where I fly, there are a lot of hazards. You can see the big hills all surrounding me. Also, Wellington's always kind of windy, so you've got to be really good at learning like the weather, because there's so many times, like especially if you look to the left, there's that big hill. It can get quite rough if you get low in the lee of that. Yeah, there's lots going on where I fly in Wellington, just because there's so much to sort of, and it's never calm. Even now, there's probably like, I think in this flight I had like a 15k an hour headwind, but it was a northerly and it was funneling down the valley, so funneling down the valley, so I didn't have to worry too much. It got a bit rough at parts, but it wasn't too bad. Right, in terms of gear, if you buy brand new, you're looking at about 15 grand for the motor in New Zealand. There's a few big brands. There's like Maverick, Scout, PAP, McFly, Bulldog, Open PPG. They're all pretty good. Scout is, if you're into big cross country, so big long flights, Scout's sort of like that's the brand to go for. That's the one I have because I like doing big long flights, especially the new harness. Looks pretty good. Their whole setup is just adventure flying. That's like the brand, and that's sort of how they advertise themselves. Maverick is kind of the brand Maverick. It's kind of like the standard, I guess. That's probably the most common in the States, which is where paramotoring is big. And there's a bunch of other. There's McFly, which is probably one of the premier brands. Then there's PAP, and then there's Bulldog, and there's lots of other companies that sell the frames and the harnesses. There's only really like Dudek are the ones that sell the main harness. Dudek and Scout. There's, I think, another couple brands that sell the harnesses, but there aren't that many harnesses to choose from. And then there is, so that's like the frames, I guess. They're like the main manufacturers. There's reserves to think about. You can either go steerable or non-steerable. You can do the research on that. I run a steerable reserve in my Paramotor. I run a beam of 3, just because obviously you can see where I'm flying above. If I ever have to throw a reserve, I want to be able to disable my wing and be able to steer and land on a field or somewhere. Not that I'd ever really think I'd need to throw a reserve where I fly, because I always fly in stable air, especially above built-up areas, like I'm flying now. But yeah, just something to consider. In terms of motors, so you can either go with petrol or electric. There's only one real company that sells electric, that's Open PPG. I think there's a company in Italy, but I think they just sort of copied what Open PPG have done. The limitation to electric is that their flight times are about an hour 20, and that's on a really high end. Like, so my glider is a Viper XC, super efficient. Oh yeah, quite fast. Probably one of the faster gliders. Well, probably the fastest glider. No, it is faster than that. But yeah, it's a fast glider, super efficient. You get an hour, maybe an hour 20 if you're a light on their electric motors, whereas petrol, 3.5 hours sort of minimum. And then you can start adding like extra tanks. So I mean, on my motor I get 3.5 hours. It's an 18 litre tank, comfortably. And you can add like an external bladder, an external 6 litre bladder, so you can knock that up to like 5 hours. And then on the Scout you could add a variable pitch propeller, and you get like an extra, I don't know, it's like an extra 33% for fuel saving as well on top of that. So yeah, there's lots of things you can like customize. So petrol motor, you can get up to like 5 hours flight time. Electric, it's only an hour and a half, so, well, no, an hour 20 at the most, which is really only like 40 minutes usable, because you want to have a little bit of time in reserve. Wings, so if you go learn how to paraglide, you'll obviously have to buy all your paragliding kit, so you'll get like a paragliding wing, paragliding harness, which is all, I guess, extra cost, but then it teaches you to like fly in active air. So this is where I would always advise people to learn how to paraglide first, so you learn how to like handle a glider in active air, and turbulence, I guess, because that's basically what you're flying a paraglider in, unless you're like soaring on the coast. Yeah, learn how to paraglide first, because you'll get all like you won't like ski yourself, because if you're just learn how to paramotor and you've never really flown on active air, and you go fly either in the middle of the day or you go fly into some real turbulent air, you can really put yourself in trouble. And if you don't know how to actively pilot the wing, yeah, you can give yourself a bit of a fright, yeah, there are pilots that leave the sport because they're not comfortable with the heavy turbulence, because they haven't learned to paraglide and just become comfortable with it. Yeah, so I think I've covered everything. Oh yeah, so there's wings, there's like Ozone, Dudek, BGD, Flow, Abco, Jin. There's a bunch of different brands that sell paramotor wings, nowhere near as many as the paraglider wings. Paramotor and paraglider wings are completely different. You can look that up on YouTube. Ozone's probably the biggest brand. There aren't that. Oh, there's a few. All the sellers in New Zealand, you've kind of just got to contact. There aren't really many online websites you can sort of buy stuff from. It's a pretty small community. There's also, yeah, there's no real second-hand paramotor wings in New Zealand, other than really old gear. So that's the other thing to note. The modern gear is just so much, in my opinion, is so much better than like anything that's sort of 15 years older. Motors especially. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much covered everything. In terms of conditions you can fly, in Wellington it's kind of too windy all the time and just too turbulent to where I'm flying now to fly it that often. That's why I try and do big flights. So anything over sort of 15 k's an hour, unless it's like flatlands. If you've got hills, you can fly in front of the hills, but if you've got hills and you need to like fly behind them, it just ends up being kind of too turbulent. So it's really like a fine weather sport. I typically fly at nights or early mornings, just because on a paramotor it's nice when it's nice and smooth. So yeah, so in terms of costing, I probably haven't mentioned that. All up, I mean, if I added everything that I've probably spent in the sport, probably, if I bought everything new, I didn't buy everything new, I got quite a few things second hand, but if I did buy everything new, it'd probably be between 25 and 30 grand if I had to buy everything brand new. I didn't, I bought things second hand. But if you're not experienced, or if you haven't done a heap of research, yeah, buying second hand can be quite tricky. And you also take the risk if you buy second hand that if you don't know how to like replace things on a wing, and if you don't know how to check a wing, etc., if you don't know what you're looking at, you can run into problems. And if you're not like, yeah, there's lots to it. So buying brand new is kind of good if you don't want to try and learn all the stuff that you need to learn, because there is a lot. But then you obviously pay the price for it. Cool, I think that's it. There's heaps, there's like a lot to learn. There's heaps of stuff on YouTube. But in New Zealand, one other thing I'd probably mention is that in New Zealand, the air traffic is such that it pays to have an aviation radio license, so you can listen to air traffic, and there are ways you can I have a Bluetooth in my headset, so I can listen into air traffic, and I can communicate as well, but you have to have a license for that as well. So it's what it is. But I think that's the same in the States. So yeah.